I love Stephen A. and I love Skip Bayless. So anybody who thinks I'm coming on here because I'm intending to somehow morally remonstrate against my compatriots here is ridiculous. They have given me this platform and permitted me this opportunity to engage in dialogue. And especially I'm disturbed by people who would therefore call Stephen A. Smith a sellout because he expresses viewpoints that are dissenting against the predominant viewpoint or the mainstream. That's ridiculous. Having said that, I have vigorous disagreements with my dear friend Stephen A. Smith, and I just want to kind of lay those out here and then echo some of the things I heard Skip say. First of all, on its face, Marc Cuban's viewpoint is rather innocuous. We'd say, look, he's just talking about common sense approaches to belief and how one behaves oneself in the midst of a potentially menacing situation. So I see a black kid, with a hoodie on the street, then I walk to the other side. If I see a white guy on the other side, then with tattoos and bald head, then I walk back on the other side of the street. And then he says we all have bigotry. Well, let's begin to unpack some of that. First of all bigotries are not created equally. This is a false equivalence between, say, being fearful of a white guy with tattoos and a bald head. And notice the white guy has to have tattoos and a bald head. The black guy just has to be black with a hoodie. That's a kind of distinction there that should not be dismissed. Number two, there's no history of legal or moral, if you will, arguments against the existence of a white guy with a bald head in tattoos. There may be cultural revulsion, there may be aesthetic resistance, but there is no law established that sees this person as menacing to the entire society. Whereas a black person, not with a hoodie alone, but a black person as a black person has been subject to the history of Jim Crow and other forms of law that have demonized and stigmatized that person. Furthermore, there's been a culture of revulsion against black style and aesthetic, except, I might add, when it's on the basketball court. Those guys who wear hoodies who might be a person who plays for the Dallas Mavericks wouldn't be as offensive to Mr. Cuban in a familiar context. It's the unfamiliar context then that would present a problem. But the point is, most black people don't play for Marc Cuban. So most black people, even Stephen A. Smith, even myself, could be on the street somewhere with a hoodie on that might present a problem to Mr. Cuban. When he then says, look, I chose a bad example, no, I think it's a perfect example. Look at what is most at the forefront of his mind. Look at the unconscious reflex that we all have. That's the point here. The deeply entrenched beliefs, values, and behaviors that we enact, the kind of unconscious bigotry that we communicate, and the fact that in American society today, the very scrutiny to which black people are subject and others suggests to us that that bigotry is not arbitrary, that example is not something that, oh my God, it's a poorly chosen metaphor for what I'm talking about here. No, it's precisely the point that that's the first thing you think about that suggests to us this is the polite face of a bigotry that has to be exposed. To his credit, Mr. Cuban says, look, we all have bigotry. I accept that. But what's interesting to me is that Donald Sterling's form of expression, his racist beliefs, are on a continuum. See, race is not a card, it's a condition. There's a continuum of belief here. When politicians say, look, we have to be concerned about the urban population because the urban population isn't concerned about raising its children, or they have problems with their own families that are dysfunctional and pathological. We know that those are substitute terms for African American and Latino. So that's on a continuum with Donald Sterling. I believe that Marc Cuban's unconscious reflex of bigotry toward those African American people who may be hooded is precisely the problem that led to the death of a Trayvon Martin. I am not suggesting that Marc Cuban is in any sense George Zimmerman. I'm saying there's a continuum of belief that reinforces deeply entrenched biases in this culture, and they're not all equal. And let me end by saying this, that the fact is that, yes, we all have bigotry, but as Stephen A. pointed out on this show yesterday, racism is a different matter altogether. It's the systematic attempt to subordinate one group as inferior and elevate another group as superior. So when we talk about bigotry and prejudice, of which we all are, of course, victims and that we all possess, we cannot mix that up with the institutional reinforcing of values, visions, and understandings of other people that then subordinate them in all kinds of ways. And what's interesting to me is that a conversation about them, that is racist bigots who reinforce their own pathology becomes a conversation about us and what we do. Martin Luther King Jr. dressed correctly. He spoke the King's English to the Queen's taste. He wore a fedora. Rosa Parks was immaculately dressed, but despite their immaculate dress, they were subject to the most vicious forms of recrimination. Let's bring it up to date now. Barack Obama, President of the United States of America, dresses correctly, speaks correctly, went to undergraduate at Columbia, went to graduate school at Harvard and law school, and is still subject to a racist sheriff who refers to him as the N-word. So I'm saying to you that no matter how much we deploy our own gifts, no matter how talented we are, no matter how rhetorically sophisticated we are, that will not in any way dislodge the deeply entrenched bias in the mind of another person or the institutional infrastructure that reproduces the pathology of racism in America. My good dress will not stop the bad habits of a bigot in America, neither will it interrupt the institutional expression of racism in America today. So I think Marc Cuban plays into that unconsciously. It's not his intent, but my pastor told me a mosquito's intent is to draw blood from you, but the consequence could be it gives you malaria. So intent should not be confused with consequence. It may not have been, and I doubt whether it was, in any sense, a racist intent, a bigoted intent on the part of Mr. Cuban, but the consequences of his language signify in a culture where black men in hoodies suggest menace, suggest illegality, suggest something that should be watched and something that should be resisted. And I don't think we should pass that along as, oh my God, it was a misspoken word. I think it's a revelation of what we are as a nation, and Mr. Cuban is to be congratulated for his honesty. Now our work is to not only parse his words, but to unpack the bigotry, talk about our contribution to it, and how we can deal with both individual and institutional expressions of racial oppression in America.
All right.
Stephen A.